So today we're revisiting a webinar that we last delivered in 2023 as we came out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to be exploring how organisations have been supporting the mental wellbeing of their staff over the last 3 years, looking at emerging trends that's coming out of recent data and research, and illustrating that with creative examples from some of our own charter signatories. Before we home in on mental wellbeing specifically, I think it might be useful just to provide a little bit of context around the wider topic of workplace health promotion in general. Workplace health and wellbeing had become a priority for employers even before COVID-19 changed the way we worked overnight. But 2020 was really, I think, when workplace wellbeing was at its most visible. COVID safety measures required employers to adapt to new ways of working overnight, while simultaneously finding new ways to support colleagues. Since then, unfortunately, many aspects of well-being in the workplace have started sliding back down the priority list. But the good news is that according to Gallup's State of the Global Workplace report earlier this year, individual life evaluation improved in 2025, and that's the first improvement in 3 years. And when they're talking about life evaluation, they were asking respondents how positive they feel about their lives now and how optimistic they feel about the coming 5 years. And just a reminder that any research that went into this webinar and any research that I mention on the way through, it's all captured on a slide towards the end so that you can go back and have a deep dive into the reports, into the data, if you so wish. So, please don't be scribbling down the names of bits of research as I mention them. They're all listed on the slide at the end. If any new ones come up in answer to any of your comments and questions, then we'll be sure, to add those in. So going back to Gallup's research that came out earlier this year, their State of the Global Workplace report, they did find that actually workplace engagement levels have dropped globally, particularly among managers, and that managers were more likely to report stress, anger and isolation, perhaps as they're responsible for difficult choices that impact people's lives. Managers have got the unenviable task of making everything work in the real world against tight budgets, AI coming into the scene, changing expectations of workforce and customers, etc. So I just wanted to highlight that when we're talking about employee well-being today, please remember that we're talking about all employees, regardless of their place in any management hierarchy. Some of the slides will, refer to management roles and responsibilities, but please don't lose sight of the fact that employee well-being refers to everybody. Okay, let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. So the information here is taken from a 2025 publication from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, and it's their Health and Wellbeing at Work publication. And I just want to note that in previous years, the CIPD reports have compared results from each of the previous years, whereas in their 2025 report, they only offered a comparison with the results from 2020. So what I've done is I've dug out an archived report so that I can show you the comparative data from 2022. I thought I'd just mention that in case any of you go looking at the 2025 report and wonder where on earth those 2022 figures came from. I didn't just pluck them out of thin air. I have actually gone looking for them. So overall, it's still very positive. An increasing number of employers have a wellbeing strategy in place. Of the 43% that don't, the vast majority of those are small employers with less than 50 members of staff, and they're much more likely to act flexibly according to the needs of individuals. Wellbeing continues to be on the radar for senior leaders and line managers, and I think as a result, that's why more people report feeling supported by their leaders and their managers than they have done in previous years. Only a minority of organisations, of respondents, feel that their organisation takes a more reactive than proactive approach to health and well-being. Reactive means supporting an individual once they're unwell. So that could be providing access to counselling or access to a GP, or maybe a reactive occupational health referral, for example. Proactive refers to promoting good well-being, and it's more of a preventative measure. So, it's still down around a third of organisations are more reactive than proactive. And this is terminology that we will come back to a little bit later on. So I'm just interested to see how the people here today, how we measure alongside the findings of the CIDPD report. I'm just going to pop up a poll on the screen. Hopefully, there we go. Depending on how you access the webinar today, this might be up front and centre in your screen. It might be on the chat. Unfortunately, for some people's IT, the poll might not show at all. But if you can see it, please just put in your findings, whether you think your organisation is more reactive or more proactive when it comes to employee wellbeing. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so we're in sort of the same region as the findings of the Chartered Institute on Personnel and Development. Around a third of us would say that our organisation is more reactive than proactive. So that's interesting to know. Thank you for that one. To get that off of your screen, if you just click the cross or the X in the top right-hand button of the square, that should get rid of it for you. And I'll just close it from my end as well so that it hopefully disappears. Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's worth remembering mental health is intrinsically linked to all areas of our lives. It's influenced by our physical health, by our finances, our general well-being, our gender, our culture. It's Carers Awareness Week this week, and being a carer for somebody has a massive impact on our mental well-being. So mental health doesn't have to just be this standalone approach that you take. Offering resources, staff networks, training on any of these other situations and life events will also have a knock-on effect on mental well-being. So the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, I'm just going to call it CIPD, it's much easier to say. CIPD asked, to what extent, if any, was employee health and wellbeing activity designed to promote 8 specific dimensions of health and wellbeing? And these were their findings. So, for example, 89% of respondents said that their organisation's health and wellbeing activity was designed to promote mental wellbeing. Very close behind it was promoting the organisation's values and principles. And we've got a case study that's going to pick up on this a little bit later on in the webinar. Interestingly, only 68% of respondents said that their health and wellbeing activity was designed to address financial wellbeing in any way. And it's worth me just mentioning that, because in a separate piece of research that actually asked UK working adults what worried them the most, the top 3 concerns were all finance related. So it was the rising cost of living, family or personal finances, and job security. So maybe there's a bit of a mismatch there. One of the thing that's most worrying UK working adults, less than 3/4 of employers are providing any support for. So that could be debt and finance advice via an employee assistance programme. It could be resources or awareness events from, a financial support charity, but some sort of support around financial well-being would be helpful, perhaps. So these are the 8 dimensions that were looked at from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, but there's a wide range of life events that are influencing our mental well-being. So I'm just interested again to find out how the people here today, how maybe we reflect wider findings from some of these pieces of research. So I'm just going to pop another poll up on your screen. Just bear with me. Okay, so within your organisation, which groups of people or which life events does your organisation offer resources or support? And you can put in as many responses as you want. You can submit as many as you like. So it could be training, it could be staff network events, it could be EAP support. Let's just pop some in there, please, and let's see how we get on. Okay. Okay, let's keep going, see what we've got. Oh, lots of people offering training, which is good, and that's the theme we'll pick up on a little bit later on. And menopause, women's health, yeah, family friendly, health cash in there, that's good to see. Carers coming through nice and strong. So people are still adding to this, and I'm going to let this just sit on the screen for a little while. But perhaps, if you're here today and you're somehow tasked with staff support, staff wellbeing strategy, and you're wondering where on earth you should start or what other employers are doing, then perhaps that research from CIPD and some of the responses on the word cloud here will just give you a sense of what other employers are doing, which aspects of life are being targeted by other employers. Hey, it's still going. Look at this. If there's a particular group of people or a particular demographic for which you'd like to offer support, and perhaps you're struggling to find resources, then please do get in touch, and we may well be able to signpost you to national organisations that can help with that. There are a couple of directories online that are really helpful signposting tools for finding support organisations. Okay, I'm going to close that down in a minute. And again, to get it off your screen, it's the cross in the top of the box there. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you're looking at the last slide and you're looking at that word cloud and thinking, well, this is great, but where on earth do I start with all of this? You might be interested in a database that's available online. So it's provided by the McKinsey Health Institute. And again, the link to it is provided in a slide at the end of the webinar. And the McKinsey Health Institute analysed 115 workplace interventions to provide an interactive database of evidence-based workplace intervention findings. So they looked at 4 dimensions. They looked at physical well-being, mental well-being, social well-being, and spiritual well-being. If you go onto that interactive database, you can sort by the health dimension you're interested in. You can sort by organisational level. Are you looking for something to support everybody? Are you looking for something to support a team or just an individual? You can sort by workplace objective. Are you trying to improve communications? Are you trying to reduce absenteeism? Are you trying to improve team cohesion? And then you can also sort by gender applicability. Once you've put in the parameters of the search, it will come up with the list of evidence-based interventions, and it provides a link that will take you straight to that intervention so that you can read about it and learn about it and work out whether it is something that would be applicable to your organisation. So do take a look at that and see if that might be helpful to you. So let's hone this down a little bit more now. Let's get on to looking at mental well-being. Returning to CIPD's Health and Wellbeing at Work report, we can start to build a picture of the methods being used by UK employers to support the mental well-being of their staff. Unfortunately, what you're going to notice is a reduction in every area here, unfortunately, apart from one. And that one, unfortunately, is the number of organisations taking no action at all to support the mental well-being of their staff. And that's actually increased by 4, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, last 3 years. I think for me, the big concerns here are the significant drop in the number of organisations offering phased returns and reasonable adjustments to support the mental health of their staff, and the reduction in the number of organisations providing training for managers in mental health. Mental health is the biggest cause of long-term sickness absence. It's the second biggest cause of short-term sickness absence. Reasonable adjustments are a legal consideration, a legal requirement in the majority of situations. So I'm not quite sure why there's been such a big drop-off. I think we'd need to look at that on a bit more of a case-by-case basis. And unfortunately, that's not part of the report. When it comes to management training, mental health training, the World Health Organization emphasizes this. It's pivotal for managers. Managers are the interface between the organization and the individual. A little bit later on in the webinar, I'll have a really quick look at the return on investment for mental health training for managers, just to highlight this a bit further. Employee assistance programs are no longer the most common intervention offered by employers to support employee mental health. That's dropped a third. The average uptake of an EAP, depending on which piece of research you look at, is between 5 and 7% of eligible staff. Most employees are using self-help tools, apps, and free online resources, even when their employer is providing an EAP. So the most popular interventions now are, phased returns and reasonable adjustments and access to a counselling service. Possibly that's a reaction to NHS waiting lists, I don't know. And they may now be the most popular interventions, but you'll see they're still on the decline. There's not as many organisations offering them as were in 2023 or in 2020. Also, mental health first aiders have peaked. They peaked in 2023. They're now at their lowest level since 2019. And mental health first aiders are going to be the subject of our first case study, which we're going to have a look at next. So the reasons for mental health first aiders declining in popularity are varied, but it probably includes the cost of training and the cost of recertification, in a tight economic backdrop. Some organisations find that their workforce are reluctant to engage with mental health first aiders for a variety of reasons. Mental health first aiders can find it difficult to balance the needs of their job role with the additional demands of being a mental health first aider. So there are many reasons why the numbers might be dropping. In our 2023 webinar, we featured a case study from Home Group, and they'd created an actual job description and an application process for people that wanted to volunteer to be a mental health first aider. Today, we're looking at a different example, and it's from the Royal Hospital for Neurodisability. They have over 60 trained mental health first aiders, providing 24/7 support to colleagues across all wards and several departments. And they've taken steps to build a structured framework around their mental health first aider team, so protecting their well-being, but also encouraging engagement from their colleagues and the wider workforce. The first thing they've looked at is line manager support. So when someone expresses an interest in becoming a mental health first aider, they need to get agreement from their line manager. They need to make sure that, all parties are fully aware of the expectations of the role, the boundaries of the role, the time commitment, and how that might interact with their existing job description and requirements. So line manager agreement is required before somebody embarks on their mental health first aider training. Once someone is a mental health first aider training, they then have monthly team debriefs where all the mental health first aiders can get together for peer support to share experiences and learning. There are also breakfast debriefs available quarterly, and these are at 8 o'clock in the morning to engage with the mental health first aiders that might be working nights or evening shifts and might struggle to attend the monthly debriefs, which are held in the afternoon. The hospital's mental health first aid policy requires that all mental health first aiders attend at least one debrief meeting per quarter. And that's a very important proactive part of supporting the mental health first aider network. In addition to those team debriefs, they also offer flexible one-on-one sessions, just providing individual mental health first aiders space to reflect, space to talk over, perhaps something that's been quite challenging for them. And then crucially, the mental health first aiders have ongoing professional development. They have access to additional training around topics perhaps like infant loss, compassion fatigue, bereavement. So it's providing the mental health first aiders with the tools to respond confidently while also protecting their own well-being. And that's quite, that's a comprehensive framework to put around their mental health first aider team. I think a learning point from this, peer support networks, mental health first aider networks, champion networks, they don't support themselves. They need structure, they need accountability and ongoing investment, if they're going to have that real value within the workplace. Okay, I'm going to take a pause there because we've covered quite a bit of ground regarding statistics and the overall picture. So I'm just going to hand over to Andrea, who's going to facilitate whether anyone has any comments and questions on what we've discussed so far. So Andrea, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Always very informative and interesting. So take a little break and have a sip of water or whatever you've got to hand. Okay, so any questions or comments? I've been monitoring the chat. I do just want to check that everybody can see the presentation because I know Rachel couldn't. I did reply to you, Rachel, so hopefully you can now. Yeah, fab. There's some thumbs up going up. Yeah, brilliant. That sounds good. The trick is to leave the sessions usually and rejoin. That usually unlocks these things. So that's great. Excellent. Okay. So any questions at all? There's no pressure. Yep, we've got somebody. Catherine. Bear with. Let me sort your mic out. And your camera. Okay, Catherine. There you are. Can see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. There you go.
Yeah, and I popped it in the chat, but I thought it might be just easier to raise here. I think I've been in workplace wellbeing both in the States and in the UK, and I think in recent years definitely seen more of that shift as you highlighted of a more topics being covered, more of a personalized kind of tailored approach when it comes to workplace wellbeing initiatives. But I think I've also started to see the challenge that can bring while it's I think a more effective approach. The practical challenge of it is how do you sort of cover all these different topics, as you showed in the case study? How do you kind of continue adding to the expectation of knowledge for champion roles while it still being a voluntary role and not sort of overwhelm all the types of topics that you're covering either on your intranet so that it becomes not navigatable or not as easily navigatable, while also still trying to balance that practical focus of maybe an executive leadership team that is tunnel focused on mental health, sickness, absence, resilience, but not necessarily seeing the connections of how all these other topics link to that more widely. So we have quite a sort of, I think, a proactive preventative approach, but I think we're quite a large organization, and it's just that challenge of how do you continue to sort of add more and more and more different topics to cover on the practical challenge of managers or champions and the organization having to become aware of more and more things.
Yeah, I think it's very tricky, Catherine, because of course nearly every day is a something day now. So then this week is Carers Week, and there's that pressure that you've got to deliver something every time there's an initiative in that week, and that's great if you've got the time to do that. But I think as well, you can have a small list of resources, you can have a huge long range of resources, etc. But it's probably more about reminding employees what's there, because we're all very good at knowing what's there when we need it, if that makes sense. Whereas sometimes when we might not be in a very good place ourselves, maybe we've had a bereavement or something like that, it's about reminding people what is available. But I'd love to have a conversation with you about the difference between America and here. So I think that'd be really interesting. But we'd probably run over past 11:15. So yeah, I'm really tempted to get in touch with you afterwards. But yeah, just because I'm intrigued. Kim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just to say, a little bit later on in the webinar, there's a case study in sort of referring to Catherine's point about getting to know your workforce and the needs of the workforce. So I think we'll come back to that a little bit later on for you as well, Catherine.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's have a look. I'm going to work backwards here. So Alison, we have a Teams chat for our Wellbeing champions so that the team can respond asynchronously. I can't even pronounce that, asynchronously. Okay. I'm not sure what that means. I think I know what you mean. And a shared document for suggestions, resources, etc. in addition to meetings. That sounds great. The only issue with having lots of Teams channels is it can get a bit overwhelming because you're constantly interrupted. So you might, thank you. It means as and when they are available. Thank you, Alison. Every day is a school day. That's my mantra. So thank you for that. I still can't pronounce it correctly. I'm not going to do it again. So thanks for that. But yeah, it's about possibly just managing how much you're interrupted by your team's channels. Okay, what have we got here? Ruth, we encourage our employees to bring their whole selves to work to target the proactive approach. Of course, there are boundaries with this, as we can't be responsible for everything that happens outside the workplace, absolutely. But I do think it impacts our staff's overall well-being and capacity to function well. This is the base on which we build our well-being offer and strategy amongst all the training services and other initiatives. That's great. And that's really important to recognise that our outside life does impact on our work life. However, some people do protest, oh yes, I definitely, keep the two separate. That's almost impossible because this thing in here is very, very powerful, and it does knock on. Davinia, if anyone wants more information about how we support mental health first aiders, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you. And Catherine, we've just spoken to. Okay. Any other comments or questions at all? Okay, there's another chance at the end, so you won't miss out. If you suddenly think of something, we'll catch up with you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Always wanted to say that. Okay, so you will have noticed that we started the webinar at 10:15. That's deliberate. That's all about trying to give people breaks between the end and the beginning of meetings. So you might want to start introducing that within your organisation or your team. And it does work well. Obviously, there might be a shift at some point. People start doing everything on the quarter pasts and the quarter twos, but it does work to start with. And we do encourage mini movement breaks. So a mini movement break's really important because musculoskeletal issues are the second highest long-term sickness absence. So it's really important that we get away from our screens and move. I don't mind how you move. I'm not going to get up and move and start stretching in front of you because that would be really embarrassing for everybody. So what should we say? 3 minutes, Kim? How does that sound?
Yeah. And just to say, my screen's having a bit of a blip. So while we're on our mini movement break, I'm going to stop sharing the presentation and then put it back up again. So if anyone wonders where it's gone, it will be back within a few seconds.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that, Kim. And I will pop in the chat a link to 2020, which you may or may not be familiar with. So the 20-20-20 rule is about taking a break from your screen every 20 minutes and focusing on something for 20 seconds that's at least 20 feet away. And that's all about looking after your eyes. So I will pop that in the chat in a second. And it's 10:52, so we'll reconvene at 10:55.
Hi everyone, and we're back. I hope you did take the opportunity to get up and have a little bit of a move and adjust your eyesight. I know I certainly did. Feel a little bit more reinvigorated now. Okay, so let's take us through to the end of the webinar.
Can I just interrupt?
Yes.
Sorry, so rude. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of mentions in the chat and say thank you, really, because Isabel has put a link into Breakthrough, which is encourages mini movement breaks, and Rebecca has told us that she encourages her employees to have monthly desk yoga sessions. I know, so I'm intrigued. I'm going to be doing some Googling soon, see what I can do. So thank you both for those. Sorry to interrupt.
That's right, no problem at all. Thank you. Yeah, I use the Breakthrough app on Teams just to make sure I get up and move around on a regular basis. Okay, so just one slide on the business case around mental health interventions for anybody that may be involved in this as part of the aspect of your job. So not surprisingly, finding the budget for employee wellbeing has been cited by employers as their top challenge, which is why we thought it might be useful just to highlight some of the return on investment here. So Deloitte analysed a range of research and studies, and by sort of aggregating the results, they indicated an average £4.70 return for every £1 invested on mental health support at work. But it's only an average, and the size of the return varied according to where that investment was made. So reactive support, supporting an individual once they've become unwell or they're symptomatic, that has a return on investment at £4.10 for every pound spent. So it is still a return on investment. Very slightly more at £4.20 for every pound spent were proactive interventions. So that's supporting the individual, trying to identify concerns and issues and risks before they become symptomatic. So a slightly better return. However, the biggest return on investment comes from these collective organisation-wide approaches that they refer to as universal. And that sees a £6.30 return for every £1 spent on mental health interventions. So this includes things like mental health awareness training, consideration of working practices, psychological safety, and crucially, training programmes for managers, where the return on investment is £5 for every £1 spent. It's a much higher return on investment than just providing reactive support for somebody once they're struggling. And I've already mentioned it, but the World Health Organization is really hot on line manager training and refers to them as the interface between the organization and the individual. We see some, organizations with really comprehensive strategies. An awful lot of thought has gone into supporting staff. But if line managers aren't consistent in their approach, if they're not aware of their organisational policies or the resources available, then perhaps their staff team members are not going to be getting the same experience as others. So I'm interested again to see how the people attending today are representative of sort of the wider findings from the earlier report from CIPD. So I'm just going to pop a poll up on the screen if I can find it. There it is. So again, this will either be in your chat or right in the middle of the screen. Does your organisation provide mental health training for its line managers? If you can just select an answer and submit it, please. If you remember, the findings of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development was that only 29% of UK organisations offer training on mental health for their line managers. Happily, we're beating the trend. We're there at 63% of people today, which is good to see. And perhaps not unexpected, given that you're aware of this webinar, so perhaps mental health and wellbeing is more on your radar anyway, but still reassuring. Thank you, it's good to know. So I'm just going to close that one. If it's still on your screen, hit the cross in the corner of the box to get rid of it. Thank you very much. Providing support for people that have become unwell and in need of help is important, but the point to take away from this is not to rely exclusively on reactive interventions. Have a combination of reactive support along with that universal approach. Take steps to minimise the risk of harm, to manage the main psychological risks that might come alongside people's particular job work. If you're interested in knowing a little bit more about this, on the slides at the end, there's a reference to an article by the McKinsey Health Institute called Burnout. Are you solving the right problem? And that's really insightful, and that's a really useful read. On the topic of training, our next slide, our next example of good practice is a project that features training for managers and health and wellbeing champions. So Northumbria Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust recognised the need to act proactively and to enhance their training provision. And they undertook a 3-month pilot exploring how signposting could benefit their workforce. So the project aimed to promote accessible wellbeing resources while also empowering those people in leadership roles to confidently address sort of team member mental health needs. So with support from their health and wellbeing colleagues and the communications team, they promoted bookable one-on-one clinic slots for individuals to seek guidance and signposting options. They also offered 75-minute training sessions for their managers and health and wellbeing champions, upskilling them in signposting options and empowering them to support team members. Originally, they'd arranged 3 of these training sessions, but they were so popular, they added another 3. And one of those was a bespoke session specifically for volunteers. As a pilot, as a project, it was measured, so they have some outcomes that they're able to report, which is always interesting. The training sessions proved much more popular than the one-on-one signposting clinics. Only 6 people attended those as opposed to 152 attending the training. And perhaps that's something for organisations to consider when you're relying on individual members of staff to seek out resources and sources of help. Perhaps, there's that reluctance to do so. 100% of people attending the training said they'd recommend it to other people. Before the training, 62% of attendees described their knowledge of signposting options as somewhat good or very good. This was 100% after they'd attended that training. And they were also asked to rate their confidence. I think it was out of 10 in an ability to signpost. And there was an average 46.5% increase in confidence. So I think by any measure, that's a successful project. Training is resource efficient, invests in leadership, and it empowers the people that are most likely to have an impact on staff wellbeing. It's a really good example of a proactive, universal approach. So just a few more considerations around these universal approaches. We've mentioned mental health training already, but your leaders should set the tone. They should manage, they should model good behaviour regarding taking breaks, spotting potential warning signs, challenging stigma. They should really be giving the message that it's okay to not be okay in your organisation. The research from Deloitte that I mentioned earlier in the business case, they suggest a £5.90 return on investment from early identification of those staff at increased risk of mental health challenges. So earlier on, sort of Catherine mentioned, how do you know which of these resources to offer when there's so many different life events to consider? So it's about getting to know your staff, Do you have a high level of carers, of working parents, people with physical health concerns? Have you got a lot of new starters? That can be quite a challenging time for people. So the reports call them high risk groups, but it's those people that, because of other circumstances in their life, are more at risk of the impact of pressure and experiencing mental health difficulties. How do you promote your wellbeing resources? Don't rely exclusively on electronic communications. Think about how job roles, how team locations impact people's ability to receive those messages. We see organisations where they put the information on the back of toilet doors, in staff restrooms, in pay slips. It's mentioned as part of toolbox talks, etc. We had one employer that actually the health and wellbeing team went out and visited every site and every team, even outside of typical working patterns, to make sure that the message got across. Autonomy. Research shows that when we have choices in how we approach our work, we report stronger well-being and higher levels of engagement. Feeling of control or influence is really important to well-being. So think about, where can you build in agency? How do you involve your staff in decision making? And the next slide is an example from Anglia Ruskin University, and it's a really good example of effective employee engagement and consultation. So following feedback from their staff surveys, Anglia Ruskin University launched an initiative called Behaviour Matters at ARU. And this was a piece of work aimed to create a supportive working and learning environment where people treating each other with dignity, courtesy and respect was the expected standard. At its core was a values and behaviours framework. And it clearly defined the behaviours that aligned with the university's values, and crucially, those that didn't. And this is a really good, this is a universal consideration, thinking about a working environment that's safe and supportive, psychological safety. This included the introduction of a confidential platform where staff could raise concerns about unwanted behaviours anonymously if they preferred. And this was whether they'd been on the receiving end of those unwanted behaviours or whether they'd witnessed them as a third party. And I think having the acceptable behaviours clearly defined in a framework gives people the confidence to know when a boundary has been crossed, and that confidence to speak up and report it. Part of the project, they provided training such as anti-bullying and harassment workshops and conscious inclusion training. And these workshops were designed with representatives from relevant staff networks. And this was addressing a need that was identified in staff surveys where some groups did not feel as included as others, or, excuse me, the slide shot on then, where some staff demographics didn't feel as supported as others. They had a comprehensive management programme where managers were provided with training in the practical aspects of their role, their systems, their processes, recruitment, inclusion, well-being, etc., giving managers the skills to feel comfortable and confident in their job. The project had regular engagement forums. I think these were fortnightly for managers and monthly for others. And these were informal virtual drop-ins, regularly updating on wellbeing initiatives and activities, providing a safe space for questions and discussions. And crucially, the staff health and wellbeing guide was updated, or still is, every year. Their latest version has had 1,000 views in just the first 3 months. And all of this was in response to staff survey. And the strategy is working. They have really high levels of engagement. So they offered 4 financial wellbeing workshops last year. 187 people attended and just over 600 people have viewed the recording. They chose their EAP based on staff feedback. What did staff actually want? Now over half of their staff are registered on an EAP support platform. And remember earlier, we looked at the national average as being only 5 to 7% of eligible staff. So to have over half their staff on their EAP platform, is enormous. And then the next slide is a quote from Anglia Ruskin University for you. Now, the university considers everything in terms of well-being. It's embedded in every aspect of their work. So if there are any new proposals for anything, they are run past the senior leadership team, they're run past HR, they're run past staff, they're run past the staff networks. Well-being isn't just a separate add-on, it's embedded across everything. So that I think the learning point, if you like, from this case study is, alongside data-informed monitoring, regularly consult with your staff to fine-tune processes and wellbeing resources, and which links back to Catherine's question earlier. And then we've just got 2 more slides to bring it to an end, and that hopefully there'll still be some time for questions. So picking up on Catherine's theme, question earlier, work with your workforce to identify what support would be helpful and what potential barriers there are. Get to know the makeup of your workforce. We all need different things at different life stages. So consider the needs of young parents, of carers, of recently bereaved, of men, neurodivergence, people from different ethnic backgrounds. Get to know your workforce so that you can target resources. Seek staff work feedback on wellbeing matters. Entrance and exit surveys can be really useful. They can highlight what attracts people to your organisation, and then why did they leave? Is there somewhere that you're not matching expectation? This can be a really important retention and recruitment tool. Evaluate your wellbeing initiatives. Monitor the usage and satisfaction rates. That can help you protect your budgets by spending money where it has most impact. It can also, evaluating the impact of your health and wellbeing initiative can also provide the evidence that you need to present to your senior team to ensure ongoing buy-in from them. And last of all, one final case study was a culture hub that won an award. So this was from an organisation called Skyrise, and their culture hub was awarded Best Employee-Led Initiative at the UK Company Culture Awards. Interestingly, it had no budget at all. It was co-created from day one. The logic being, the more the staff team shape it, the more they'll use it. So it relied on team contributions and shared learning. The format was simple and familiar. It was a Google Drive available to staff, to friends, to family, to anyone. It wasn't a workplace system. There was no login, there was no tracking, just plain language and clear categories. Learning styles, they included text, there was audio, some of it was short videos, it was accommodating different learning styles. Importantly, it's never finished. It's regularly reviewed, it's regularly updated. Things are removed if they're no longer relevant, and they signpost to resources when they matter. So if it coincides with an event in the news, if it coincides with an awareness week, perhaps an individual has a particular life event going on, and at that point they can be signposted to the culture hub. It's part of induction, it's part of regular communications and everyday work. And again, that drip feed communication strategy is working. They have high levels of engagement. 100% of employees that were surveyed said it made their organisation feel more inclusive. 67% of people said it had helped them personally, and 98% of staff had actually used the hub. So again, the more the team are involved in the design of wellbeing resources, the more they'll use them. And just to finish off, this was a quote from Skyrise, and I think this is just a really good reference point for anyone involved in developing resources. They ask themselves the question, how will this help someone in a real situation? So I just want to finish by thanking the 4 organisations that gave us permission to share their examples and gave me the time to have a chat with them and find out more about them. So thank you very much. And I'm just going to hand back to Andrea. And I know we've just got a couple of minutes to go of your time. So thank you very much. And over to Andrea.
Thanks, Kim. And as always, so comprehensively delivered. And she's been practicing the stats for a while. They're ingrained in here, which is very impressive. So thank you so much. I hope you all found that useful, and thank you for attending and staying with us this morning. I know we lost a few people at 11 going to other meetings. That's always a risk with the 10:15 start, but it's been a pleasure having you on board this morning, and I do hope you found it useful. There is a QR code. I don't know if you could move the slides forward to that, because we do really value your feedback, and honesty is the best policy. That's what I always say. We will, I've been putting the links to the reports in the chat as we've been going through, and I will be sending out all the slides this afternoon to you all. And I've also done a little bit of a plug for our training, so particularly on the being a mindful manager, which ties in lovely with what Kim was saying. Okay, well, thank you for attending. I'll email you this afternoon, and then you'll have a further email in a couple of weeks' time with the link to the recording. Okay, thank you very much. Take a break before your next meeting, and
Thanks, everyone.
and enjoy the rest of your day.